webinar, which is on a pretty important topic, I think. And this is all about working with contract manufacturers so that you can support the growth of your herbal business. I am so thrilled to be able to introduce to you Benjamin Zappin, who is the CEO and founder of 5 Flavor Herbs for this webinar. Ben, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to connect with your audience.
Yeah, it truly is a pleasure. I have been aware of your work in some way for several years now, being seeing you on social media, following bits and pieces along the way. And yeah, I looked into it more in just before doing this webinar, actually. And yeah, I can see that you've been an herbalist for like decades, but not only have you been making and selling products in your own physical location where is your physical location?
We have a compounding herbal pharmacy in Oakland, California, and that's where we started our FDA registered facility. And then we moved our manufacturing extraction facility up to the Sierra foothills in the mountains of California in Nevada City and Grass Valley, which are 2 little adjacent communities.
Yeah. And so would you like to tell me a little bit, before we get into the actual content of today's session, your background? So how you got into herbalism and your journey into where you're at now?
Yeah, thank you. And that's also why I'm excited to connect with your audience, because I relate with it so much. I mean, I've been tracking Herbal Entrepreneur for a few years and have attended classes and, gone behind the scenes. And that's been really fun for me to see the ways that you're nurturing craft makers and people who are trying to, be on different stages of their business journey. And, I think we've done it all, almost everything. So I lived in Santa Cruz, California, and Santa Cruz was a hub for herbal industry and Western and Chinese herbal education. There's a Chinese medical school there. There are lots of herbal educators. So I got to be mentored by Christopher Hobbs and Michael Tierra and Roy Upton and all these really amazing herbalist, author, clinician formulators for industry. And I started doing that when I was 20 and, started studying with them at a very young age and did apprenticeships in herbal pharmacies, doing medicine making and wild crafting. My first paid gig as an herbalist was wild crafting and going all over California, wild harvesting plants to use in apothecary. So I got to be hands-on with medicine that was being used by clinicians out of the gates. And very, very soon after that, started an apprenticeship in acupuncture with Michael Tierra. And so spent 4 years in the clinic, working every day, seeing what herbs could and could not do, and got licensed as an acupuncturist, and have always stayed hands-on making craft medicine. We moved, my wife and I started making more and more extracts to use in my practice and sell to other colleagues, and that really developed some momentum. And then at a juncture in 2011 or 2012, the exemption for small businesses for the FDA's GMPs lifted. And we said, what are we going to do? We have a fairly successful business. Like naive fools that we are, we started an FDA registered facility and pursued good manufacturing practices and, and adherence to those regulatory laws. And while concurrently starting a street level brick and mortar herbal pharmacy that we still operate out of Oakland that people can access remotely. So we're in the healthcare landscape. 11, 12 years later, we've grown out our facility. We made a much bigger facility and we manufacture for emerging brands, craft makers who want to transition into somebody else making their things so they can market their brand. And we also work with big nutraceutical companies. So we're in the industry. We have our own things that we make and sell. And then we also have a small farm up here where we're growing some of the things that we make but really growing a lot of food for ourselves and staying connected to the earth and participating in local food community, local herbal community. So that's
wonderful.
And then I run the business with my wife, Ingrid Bauer, who is a medical doctor and herbalist. And, she works as a doctor in a hospital and, is also very earth-centric herbalist. So, we're always, understanding need for regulations, need for Western medical interventions. And also we like to keep our hands in the dirt and make craft medicine. So that's me in a nutshell.
That's a great overview, I think. And I also appreciate the fact that you still identify as folk herbalists and kind of the fun, more abstract part of it in addition to the business side of things, because manufacturing can get quite, very process-like and things like that. And so it's nice to incorporate that side of things as well and just keep it well-rounded, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I'll share a lot of examples of where and how.
Which let's get into.
where and how people can try to maintain, there's always a negotiation and navigation of where and how can one maintain their value set when scaling, and whether that's scaling in your own operation or scaling working with a manufacturer. That can often be a tension point. So
I've seen that, like, people are scared to scale because they're going to lose that authenticity, and then they need to scale because otherwise, if they're doing small product batches, like, they're not having that margin of profit. And there's that like balance between the two of like how to actually do an authentic business at scale in a sustainable way that's good for the world. It's like a oxymoron if there ever was one, but hopefully there is a way to kind of navigate all of these different buckets and priorities. Would you like to start your presentation now? Will you be able to share your screen?
Yeah, I will. Share my screen. Go to
down the bottom.
Make sure this is the right presentation. Here we go. Slideshow.
You might want to start from the beginning though.
Yes. I think I just did. But no, that's the end. Okay. All right.
Perfect.
So this is how to work with contract manufacturers. And it's a lot more than that, because we're going to cover some of the topics we just covered and expose you to some of the regulations that may or may not pertain to you where you live. I know that you have a big international audience, and so some of the conversation about laws and regulations as they pertain to manufacturing in the United States may not pertain to people in other countries. But we're going to be talking about local, state, and federal law, and look into how that translates for you. And I'm going to be giving examples here with recognition that other nations have other laws. So disclosure and disclaimers here. We own and operate an herbal manufacturing company. We've already mentioned that. This presentation is not and should not be considered legal advice, not to satisfy the concerns of your local, state, and federal laws. Please seek guidance to satisfy the requirement of your own local, state, and federal laws, including but not limited to the FDA. This presentation will contain many opinions of me, and and that's not necessarily. I'm not a like dig my heels in rigid opinion person. I'm a Libra and very equivocal. It drives everybody. I work closely with crazy, so I like to maintain an opportunity to look at different points of view, and you'll see that today. I already shared a bit about my background, that depicts that we do apothecary work, that, my heart is in wild crafting and cultivation of plants, although I find myself discouraging wild crafting more than encouraging it these days, because it's gotten so trendy. And so learning objectives, when to consider a transition to a contract manufacturer, what to look for in a contract manufacturer, what to do if you aren't ready or can't afford a contract manufacturer, and general critical thinking tips for the herbal entrepreneur. So why pursue contract manufacturing? So being mindful of, while you're scaling, your skill set, your budget, your business experience, and your marketing skills. So we can touch on every one of those. The other thing that we see really commonly, so I'm the person in our company that is fielding people who want to start an herbal product company. And for better or worse, a lot of the people who want to start herbal products companies, did some sort of mastermind course on starting a business, and they haven't actually studied herbal medicine or seen it all work. Or maybe they just experienced herbal medicine via a practitioner and thought, I could do this as a business, but they haven't studied it. They haven't made it themselves, but they may have business experience. They may have marketing experience, or they may have we also see companies with a lot of money who want to invest in something and see that this is a growth industry. So your skill set may be craft medicine making, and you may make some really skillful products, and you need to consider business planning, with mentorship from herbal entrepreneur. And, like we've gotten a lot of business mentorship through community colleges, has been really useful for us at different stages of our development. But, nobody in our company has an MBA, and we've always wished that we had somebody who had those skills better. Now we outsource some of that. So, and then marketing skills. That's another one. Where and how can you partner with somebody with marketing skills? Because I see a lot of people lose, and we've experienced this ourselves, lose touch of their connectivity to the medicine that they're making, because they're spending 40 hours a week learning to use social media as a tool to market that which they were passionate about, and it can leach the passion out of your pursuit. So, this isn't a deep dive into why to pursue outside marketing skill tools in addition to outside manufacturing. But these are all things while you're stacking your what do I need to launch my business. You can make up a pie chart of which of these do I have the most skills in, and what do I really have a budget for. The other thing I always like to frame is, what do you have to lose? And when people are making, I'm going to draw this distinction right now, internal products for consumption, once you have a health claim, it's a dietary supplement. And once you have a health claim and it's a dietary supplement, you are beholden to the laws of the FDA, and you are carrying some risk. You're carrying some legal risk by making a product that is regulated. And don't worry, I'm still disappointed by this technicality. I am an anarchist at heart who has chosen to follow rules. And so keep that in mind when you're listening to me talk. So what liabilities do you have? This is a common thing that I let people know. Do you own a home? Do you have a medical license and debt? And so have you invested in a lot of things that, if you got in legal trouble or were disrupted by an FDA investigation of your business, what kind of stress would it cause on the other things that you're navigating in terms of your time, in terms of your money and your holdings? Because I do see people go out and take dietary supplements out into the market that are, that are not protected, and and sometimes they have a lot to lose, and they're not going to be insurable unless they are working in an FDA in the United States. They're not going to be able to get product liability insurance unless their product is made in a GMP facility. That's increasingly become true. We used to have product liability insurance when we made our products in our basement. That's no longer available. So what do you get when you pursue contract manufacturing? You get experience with manufacturing products at scale. How do you know people have that experience? We'll talk about that in the next slide. You get regulatory expertise. If somebody is operating a FDA registered facility, you want to check in and see how long they've been operating it. and understand what their regulatory team's quality control experience. The people operating the company should have familiarity with that and be inculcated into those systems of awareness. We'll talk about what some of those are. You want to get samples from companies that you're working with. And when you're pursuing contract manufacturing, you want to make sure that you're getting great product and consistency, and be inquiring about the determinants of consistency. And that'll be in future slides. So some contract manufacturers do provide marketing services. Ours don't, but other companies do. Some will give you guidance in the types of language that you can use. The other set of regulations that I didn't focus on here are the DSHEA laws, the Dietary Supplement Health Education laws, that in the United States determine what you can and cannot say in public forums to market your products in terms of the types of claims you can make. It's a very nuanced set of laws. It may be a useful thing, if you haven't already, to have a talk on, Yolanda, on DSHEA. And it's important to look at the origins of GMP and the origins of DSHEA. They are industry founded, industry advocated for, quote unquote, self-regulatory. There was a juncture at which the FDA said, hey, we're going to apply pharmaceutical standards to dietary supplement manufacturing and communications. And the industry pushed back. And there was a massive citizen action letter writing campaign that said, we do not want herbs and herbal products and dietary supplements regulated as little drugs. And this was around the time that I started studying herbal medicine, just shy of 30 years ago. And, really got to feel that pulse and feel that the people that I was studying with had really gone through a massive political citizen and industry partnership to keep herbs accessible to us. And I think that's important to appreciate while we're navigating our own freedoms that we want and need. So laws governing herbal products, dietary supplements, natural cosmetics, these may be local, zoning, permitting, environmental health, fire code. We've had some challenges learning about fire code because we work with tinctures, and ethanol is explosive and flammable. And when you're working with that in larger quantities, you need to be in an explosion-proof room in California. Other states don't have as stringent laws. Environmental health may want to know what you're putting down your drain. Getting spaces permitted for manufacturing. This is all stuff that if you want to play by the rules, depending on where you are, you may have to go through elaborate, expensive processes to get spaces permitted if your goal is to 100% play by the rules. We've learned the hard way many expensive times, and that sometimes that there's a popular myth for a long time. All you need to be GMP is a triple sink and and a clean room. Basically it's food safety standards. That's not accurate, especially depending on what you're working with. We have to, in California, register with the California Department of Public Health. We've only been inspected twice in 12 years, but we have to register, give them some money every year. They also have their own organic registration. The National Organic Program is another law governing herbal products and communications about what you put. That's not on this slide. National Organic Program is what oversees all the smaller local regulatory bodies. We work with CCOF, California Certification of Organic Farming, that also oversees organic products. So that's another governing body and or administrative body that you work with so that you can communicate about the standards in your products. I have links later in this slideshow that you'll all have access to, so you can go and read yourself about the CGMPs for dietary supplements. There's also a small entity, small business advisory document that's really important to familiarize yourself. One, I don't want everybody to think, who is this guy? This guy's the man. He's telling me to go do this in a box. And that's not the premise of this, but I really want to get it out there that I encourage people to understand the laws so that they can be ongoing, making intelligent decisions about the risks they're taking, and incorporate some of the principles while you're making a decision to scale, incorporate some of the principles of good manufacturing practices into what you do. That might be good record keeping, so that as you integrate these layers into your scaling practices, when you decide you're at the level to work with a contract manufacturer or a private label company, that it all makes sense to you and you have more agency when you're working in that. The other link that you'll have access to is MOCRA, or the Modernization of Cosmetics Regulation Act, that was passed last year, that we're just coming to understand the details of this, but essentially it's going to require GMP standards and product regulation to natural cosmetics and larger scale cosmetics. What is being navigated is the degree to which there is a small business exemption. Currently, I believe there's an advocated for small business exemption that if you're doing under $1 million of sales, congratulations, specifically in natural cosmetics, and that includes salves, topical oils, liniments, creams, etc., that you won't be encumbered by this burden. But I still encourage you, despite that exemption, to go and understand some of these practical guidelines that are being offered, because they're going to enable you to understand some of the risks you might be taking and the ways to mitigate risks to the customers that you're serving products to, and make better medicine. And then finally, Federal Trade Commission governs the ways that we communicate about the products. I see more topical product makers making disease claims out there online and in their product marketing that say that, hey, this is my little antifungal product, this is my product for rosacea, and these are all disease claims that in the United States is illegal to do unless you've done clinical trials on this. So again, it goes back to, what do you have to lose? The Federal Trade Commission, although it's probably illegal, issued notice last year that they're just going to be giving fines now for people who are in violation of their communications laws rather than issue warnings. So it's a big thing to unpack. It's not the scope today. It's a good thing for you to be aware of. And here is a realm of lumping and splitting: private label versus contract manufacturing. You can go and find different viewpoints on this. This is not writ as law, but it's a useful delineation. Private label, you're choosing an existing product from a manufacturer and you put your brand name on it. Contract manufacturing, you're involved more in each component of the product: formulation, packaging, labeling, making more executive decisions about the forms and the view of what goes into it. Private labeling may also be called white labeling, where you're taking a generic product and hold on, I gotta let my dog in.
No problem.
I'm in. Sorry about that. She'll just stand there and bark. So sometimes you'll see white labeling framed as what private labeling is here, and private labeling be used to describe contract manufacturing. I'm going to get into the differences. The nomenclature is not as important. Private label, you're looking at the pros: a smaller investment, possibly higher margins, because these are off-the-shelf, ready-to-use products. For instance, somebody makes a skin salve that has calendula, yarrow, St. John's wort, comfrey in it. and they have that ready to go. They already have it prepackaged in tins. They say, we have round labels and we put it on these round tins, and you can put your brand elements here. We have a $50 design fee, and those are going to be a lot cheaper if you say, I want to pick and choose my tin, contract manufacturing. I want to use 4 different kinds of oil. I want you to extract it, these extra plants, and I want to use this exotic oil from Africa, and I want to use a few Chinese herbs. That's going to be more contract manufacturing. It's going to be more hands-on. It's going to be more executive decision-making, nuance. It's going to cost you more. So private label, you're going to have higher profit margins, faster time to market, lower order minimums because the products are already available and ready from the private label company. The restocking is going to be more efficient. The cadence of your access to these is going to be much more efficient. You might work with a logo company that make it easy to create your labels quickly, and they might handle all the regulatory labeling for you. The cons, you might not get to bring as much of your craft, as much of your magic, as much of your authenticity to this. Branding, you may have to pay more for some designs if you don't wish to design yourself. You're possibly only designing the label and applying it to a generic bottle of pre-poured or pre-formulated product. That is what it is. So with contract manufacturing, you may be very involved in decision making. You might, you bring your vision, you bring your experience, you bring your ideas, you bring your brand, you bring all your authenticity, uniqueness, magic, clinical experience, whatever it is that you're bringing to your business. The competitive advantage is higher chance that your competitors won't have similar products, that you're creating definition with what's in the bottle. That may be a unique ingredient, that may be a unique extraction process, that may be something that you've observed treats a particular skin condition. It might be a magic antifungal, it might be something that really elevates the mood in a unique way, that you have a unique storytelling, that you've told that story and you've been serving this in your community for a long time and think it's ready to take to the next level. The downsides, I don't even know if they're downsides, they're just realities, they're not even cons. It's a larger and potentially higher risk investment. There may be lower profit margins depending on performance. There may be lower profit depending on your ability to get a premium price. More contract manufacturing companies, the more time and energy they put in, they're going to need to get compensated more for that. The time to market may be limited if you're using nuanced ingredients that are less common in the marketplace or have marketplace fluctuations in price and or availability, may create delays in access. And so we've seen that a lot. We've seen companies that have this amazing heroic ingredient and they launch it and they're like, we want to start with 1,000 to 2,000 units, and then they sell it all out in 3 months, and in 6 months, this thing's not going to be available in the market till next January, and they have to wait. And so that creates disruption and risk for their brand. Order minimum, you're going to see medium to higher order minimums. You often see the acronym MOQ, minimum order quantity. Restocking, the time to ship is going to be longer because of the things that I just described. If companies are having to order ingredients, receive them, process them, package them, get them to you, it's going to be a lot different if they're things that they keep in-house, make available to their customers, or are already bottled and ready to slap a label on them. And dependency, I just let you know some of the contract manufacturing manufacturer changes are your changes. So this may be pricing of commodities. This may be, you're relying on it. This might be contract manufacturing in general. If you are relying on a contract manufacturer, you're relying on their schedule. You're relying on where you are in their queue. So, we get customers come to us and they say, how can I ensure that I can get 4 batches a year of this on a quarterly basis? We say, great, put a deposit on those volumes and we'll fulfill them on a quarterly basis. We can be really dependable if we can depend on you to help sustain our company. In contrast to, we're not sure if we're going to need another 1,000 units. We just sold out of our last 1,000 units. Can you get that yesterday? Doesn't work. So how can you be prepared to work in contract, provide forecasts, and be able to build out a 12 to 18 month forecast and work with the country manufacturer so you can ensure your own dependency. Let's see. So how to choose a contract manufacturer. You want to find somebody who has experience in your market niche. We're talking about herbs here, of course. And so if you're focused on topical products, there's a lot of companies out there making salves. The canna boom had a lot of people say, I want to start a cannabis contract manufacturing company, or a lot of companies started salve companies that, they didn't sell as much CBD salve as they thought, or that market has softened. So they still have all that equipment and they're still trying to do something with it. There's a lot of salve makers out there. So it's easy to find affordable salves, especially private label. Do they have familiarity with so that's delivery system and capabilities. There's many companies that will do only 2,000 and up minimum order quantities. There's some companies that start at 10,000. There's some companies that will do 250 to 500 unit runs for you. You have to explore what those capabilities are. Breaks my heart, have had to turn down really big contracts because we don't have the capabilities for packaging that a company wants. They might need a special bottle packaged and put in a carton, and they want to get, 250,000 of those a year. We've had to say no to that. And, so if you have a big vision, a big plan, a big budget, you need to go out and shop for who has the capabilities that you need to do the scale at the prices you need. And, that's its own end of the spectrum. Familiarity with the tools that you're seeking to use. Do you have an herbalist on staff? Do you have experience doing the organoleptic, the sensory, the nuanced problem solving that we do as herbalists, and also the familiarity with the tools that you're seeking to use that might be tools that you don't have yet. You might know that you need to do lab testing, and that's a common experience we have. Somebody knows that there's a risk if their product carries heavy metals, and they've never had products tested for heavy metals. We do that every day. So, that's a place where you want the assurances that the contract manufacturers that you're looking with are familiar with the raw materials, the ingredients, stability and function, purity, potency, and strength of those ingredients, and which we'll talk about purity, potency, and strength in a minute. But also the assurances to do quality control aspects that assure things that protect consumers and allow for continuity of quality on down the road. You want a value set that matches. You want to know that the company that you're working with cares about the function and utility. And, because I know everybody in this room believes herbs work, sees herbs work, uses them, and wants the end users to have the quality of experience that they're delivering the patients or community in alleviating their suffering, increasing comfort. And I know I do. And then another key piece is a validated CGMP certification. Does a company, are they at least FDA registered, and/or do they have a third-party GMP certification? Some insurance companies will not insure you unless the manufacturer that you're working with has that third party. So some tenets of good, does anybody have any questions? I know there's a couple. Do you mind moderating that, Yolanda?
Yeah, we have a couple of would you like me to say them now, or do you want to
Yeah, let's.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we'll just have a quick break. That's yeah. So Laurel asked a few minutes ago, like who carries the liability on the products with private label versus the contract manufacturing. So like if there's a problem or whatever, like who is liable for that?
That's a great question. So the question is, who is liable? So there's a variety of forms of liability, and here's another terminology to introduce: own label distributor. That's you once you're working with a contract manufacturer. And there's some resource checklists that I've included links to that American Herbal Products Association has a very detailed checklist of, what are the liabilities and responsibilities, because all responsibilities are a potential place of liability if they're not adhered to. So I'll get to that in a minute. So there's insurance. Internal products should all have product liability insurance that is held by the own label distributor and the manufacturer. That will be determined in a contract. Our insurance requires a certain threshold for companies that we work with to carry. We validate that, we put them in touch. And then, so that's something that those insurance companies are then carrying liability. Who carries liability for communications is a big can of worms. Ultimately, you do. That's a commonplace. That's one of the highest areas of risk. If you're marketing online, is you're creating liability with the ways that you communicate about your products. And so we try to let companies know that, but ultimately we're responsible for the communication that goes under the label. We as a contract manufacturer hold the liability ultimately of the labeling being compliant. And there's some gray area in that, and there's some industry opinions that might be different from 10 different FDA auditors throughout the country. So that's a big sticky mess. And so we try to err on the side of caution and say, hey, we're liable for adhering to the laws of what you can communicate about. You can't say that this provides pain relief or cures your cancer or treats depression. What you do in your marketing is your own business. But because we generate a lot of trust and rapport with our customers, I have very commonly let our customers know when I see their marketing and they're saying, this works better than Prozac, that I think they're creating their risk for themselves. That's going to invite the FDA. 90% of FDA warning letters and FDA audits for small businesses start with marketing claims that the FDA sees online, and they're monitoring social media. They're monitoring, we saw this on your Instagram. You get a warning letter in the mail. If you're lucky. If you're unlucky, they show up at your house or your facility. We have many customers who have had the FDA show up at their house where they're running their business from and say, we're here to inspect all your paperwork and all of your stuff. So just to, give a reality check, like the FDA is really tracking this stuff. Sometimes they issue a warning, sometimes they don't, but they'll show up at your facility or they'll show up at your business address. And this is oftentimes somebody who's really freaking serious, and they carry a gun and present a badge, and they're law enforcement. And so if you don't want to have that show up, this is the same talk I give to our customers. If you don't want to be in that situation, learn the laws. We're liable for a certain set of those laws, and you're liable for another set, and we're going to warn you about those when we see you violating them. I'll get to that checklist later, which is the responsibilities that the private labeler, the contract manufacturer holds for being beholden to good manufacturing practices. And then what are you beholden to? What liability do you carry? So that's a big, long answer. That's its own 3-hour lecture. I think it might be a good idea for me to keep moving and then take more questions later, don't you think?
Yep, that's fine. I'm keeping track of everything, so you can just go for it, and then we can take the share screen off, and you can we can see your faces responding to questions.
Okay, great. So some tenets of good manufacturing practices. So CGMP, FDA set of laws, 21 CFR 111 is current good manufacturing practices. That means it's being updated on a regular basis, and means it's something that is written law. Law is interpretable. There's links available to you about that. But then here's some tenets of those that are really important things to orient yourself to. And this is what, this is good, maybe lowercase, good manufacturing practices that I think everybody has something to learn from. Purity, potency, and strength. What contaminants are not in your product. How strong is it? How consistently strong is it? So you have an amazing product, as we all know. If you harvest California poppy or skullcap when it's fresh and it's in its perfect phase for harvesting fresh, you're going to get a lot more potent product than if it's been sitting in a warehouse for 18 months in a shipping container and you're using plant material from different stages of a life cycle and different stages of potency. So how do we ensure, how do you ensure, how do we work together to ensure that there's consistency and potency batch to batch? Traceability, it's really essential that we're able to, if there's a serious adverse event or we see that there's some problem with packaging or the contents down the road, that we need to do a recall. The responsibility and liability of participating in a recall is something that we always will cooperate with. And that might be something that comes up from any stage of the supply chain. So we've had recall considerations that our suppliers bring to our attention, where we have to quarantine things and notify all the end users, all the places that we've sold, say it was, forget what that was, but so something that one of our raw material suppliers said, hey, we found a small amount of salmonella in this 5-ton batch of this herb. And we had to respond to that. We had to document our response, and we had to notify all the people that had gotten batches that had that herb in it. It turned out to be a false alarm, but it tested the traceability of every facet of that supply chain. Defining and creating and enforcing standard operating procedures, or SOPs, validating their effectiveness, defining and designating equipment effectiveness and uniformity. So, are all your bottle fills uniform? Is all the seals that are keeping your oils and salves from leaking and or going rancid sooner stable? You have to have checks for all these things. So, and we also have to have checks for preventing contamination. And that might be contamination of organic with inorganic, that is not certified organic raw materials, or that may be contamination with heavy metals, that may be contamination with microbes. So stability and testing for microbes is a big part of what we do. Documenting training of staff, having clearly defined quality control procedures, conducting planned audits. So you're checking your system every year. These are big parts of the practice of operating a contract manufacturing facility. They're part of the SOP dossier or collection of documents that a company is going to be audited for. So this is a big can of worms. And again, I provided that there's a link to a set of guidance documents that are behind a paywall that we were not authorized to just share by American Herbal Products Association. You can endorse that you become a member if you're serious. Responsibilities of the contract manufacturer include FDA registration, conform to GMP requirements, establish ingredient specifications. This is something that, this is a differentiation between private label That is, ingredient specifications. I want my plantain and comfrey that go into my salve to only be done with fresh oil that's harvested on the full moon in Taurus and prayed over by a monk. And we say we can't do that. But we can get comfrey and plantain certified organic with a SOP, with a certificate of analysis that says they are free of pesticides and heavy metals. And we can establish that and provide a check every time we make your salve. And that's going to be part of your ingredient specification. Similarly, we do that. Or we can declare that if we're defining those specifications. Maintenance of master manufacturing records and batch records is something that is the responsibility of the contract manufacturer. That they package products that conform to product specifications and master manufacturing records, as well as a purchase order, quality agreement, and or supply agreement. Another answer to the question of who holds the liability is of what is also defined in a contract. And that can get very complex, and it can be very straightforward. A specification agreement is a form of quality agreement that is simplified. Ingredient status is something a new dietary ingredient is something generally recognized as safe. It's not uncommon that people want to bring unique, new, especially in the extended zeitgeist of psychedelic freedom. Everybody comes and says, I want to use this kind of obscure, semi-psychedelic thing that is getting imported from Africa. Can you guys make something with it? And that may be a liability we don't wish to take on. The internet and market is flooded with things that are really technically illegal. Maybe their regulatory status hasn't been defined. And so that's always important if you're using illegal new ingredients that are groovy, make people feel good. It may be important to, it's really important, especially going back to our conversation about liabilities, understand what do you have to lose? What risks are you taking if there's not a regulatory status of things that are being imported, and that you're making products in your food kitchen and selling on the internet? Maintain that packaging and ingredients conform to specifications is the other thing that we do. So lots of layers of checking and double checking and defining all the process along the way. That's something that when you read and understand that your internal dietary supplements that you're making in your kitchen, selling on the internet, are beholden to all these laws, because this is the law for dietary supplements. It may not be the law if you're making topical natural cosmetics, selling under $1 million a year. Again, not a substitute for legal advice. But it is, I can guarantee it is the law if you're doing internal products in the United States. You really want to seriously consider working with a contract manufacturer. This is more details. Finished product testing. That may include stability testing that they facilitate for a fee. That may include heavy metals, pesticides, microbes, organoleptic testing, and documentation that conforms to specifications that are set. In-process testing where applicable. Ensuring labels are compliant. I already mentioned that attribute of the liability that one holds. Maintaining retention samples. Participating in reviews of complaints. These might be complaints from the on-label distributor. These may be complaints and or adverse event reports from consumers and consumers. So this is an important thing to understand the distinction between adverse events and serious adverse events. I'll give you the quick and dirty. Adverse events are anything that makes somebody uncomfortable. It's normal to have adverse events taking many herbs, and it's also relevant to skill and application. Serious adverse events mean that something warrants a visit to the ER or hospitalization. Really, it's, I think, legally defined as needs hospitalization. this is to be taken seriously. There have been multiple reports of people having anaphylactic reactions to chamomile. And so I know people who do quality control in some of the biggest herb companies in the United States, and they say, yeah, the only serious adverse event we've ever seen was somebody having an anaphylactic reaction to chamomile. Is chamomile being pulled off the market? I mean, that is hospitalization, risk of death if they weren't receiving medical treatment. Is chamomile being rushed off the market? No. But companies you'll see, tea companies from bigger tea companies that want to say calming or relaxing tea, they're adhering to dietary supplement labeling requirements, and they are acknowledging if you are allergic to herbs in the Asteraceae family that you may be at risk for anaphylactic shock. So they're providing warning labels. You're seeing this increasingly related to anything in the Asteraceae family. And it is the duty of the contract manufacturer, in addition to the on-label distributor, to report any serious adverse events to the FDA. So that's an important thing for you while you're exploring your personal company's liabilities. And don't think forming an LLC and running your dietary supplement company manufactured in your kitchen of the house you own, if somebody dies, is going to keep you from losing your house or having that be something that is attacked in a lawsuit if somebody dies. I'm going to share some other views here. These are very opinion. What do this is my endorsing that people, that there's bodily autonomy and laws that govern the body and the tensions between those. There's the tension between, what if I'm making craft herbal products, selling them to my patients and or in my community at farmers markets and crafts fairs, and this guy just scared the heck out of me talking about the laws that I didn't know. I really believe in herbal freedom and medical autonomy, and that's a big part of why I value herbal medicine is citizen autonomy, and that we in our communities can care for ourselves, we can care for our families, and we can share medicine in ways that is not necessarily under the microscope of political bodies. Radical. I still believe in that radical. So I can hold these two truths, that these laws and these practices are really valuable and really meaningful and may protect consumers. Really an advocate for freedom, people participating with freedom. How do we operate in that tension? I already mentioned some considerations. Really understanding the tenets of good manufacturing product practices and understanding the value that record keeping, risk mitigation, always understanding risk. Don't let risk stupefy you into inaction, but understand the risk and how you communicate about it, how you practice full disclosure, how you always have your ear to the tracks of risks that you might be creating. So you don't learn the hard way by harming somebody or the risks of investing in a manufacturing facility and then learning about laws that you didn't know about. That happened to us. We built out a facility and got some things permitted, and then they said, so have you done all this fire permitting? We've been operating a company for 7 years with fire inspections that never looked under certain hoods or told us about state laws. Cost us a lot of time, money, massive amounts of stress. So you want to know the laws, you want to know where you're in gray areas or violating laws and choosing to operate in your community. What does a low profile look like? My encouragement is, if you are marketing your products on the internet and know that you are not having them manufactured in compliance with regulations, and the FDA decides to look you up, you're at risk. Or they decide to do an audit. What's going to increase the likelihood of an audit of your brand is if you are violating déchet laws, if you're making claims that your products can treat diseases or are better than specific drugs, if you're comparing them to drugs, then you're making a disease claim or you're making a drug claim. So really get educated about that. And you're more likely to have a whistle blown on you and have an audit if you are making claims that are going to draw the foul, as they say in sports. If you're a practitioner, this is open source. You can access this good dispensing guidelines. This was developed by the Chinese medical community profession in conjunction with the American Herbal Products Association. It's good dispensing practices for working in a clinic or working in an apothecary. How do you adhere to a lot of these principles of understanding the raw materials, consistency of packaging, using good record keeping, traceability, hygiene, while understanding that what you're putting together and compounding is for individualized expression. That is, you're making things that you're going to take out and express to individuals in a one-on-one clinical setting. So that's a common distinction. And the FDA has been asked by American Herbal Products Association, where do you stand with this? And they said, we reserve the right to consider any custom compounded finished thing for an individual a dietary supplement, and we're going to exercise regulatory discretion. So that's what, because practitioners and this organization didn't want every practitioner to feel like they had to be beholden to good manufacturing practices for finished products for everything that they custom compounded for a patient. So in our compounding herbal pharmacy, we adhere to these guidelines as much as possible and are always auditing and developing awareness of the gaps, ongoing gap analysis of the degree to which you're adhering to good dispensing guidelines. So if you're a practitioner, if you're working in kind of a community apothecary, using this as a checklist, using this as a mirror for where you're mitigating risk, where and how do you have traceability that you can use as a benchmark for safety. All great guidelines. So those are some considerations. Here are links that I know Yolanda's going to share these slides. Links for the cosmetic laws and regulations, small entity compliance guide, dietary supplements labeling guide. These are things that change. These are things that are active discourses. My encouragement is, and I'm going to share, I'm going to pass this on to Yolanda, who I hope will circulate the APA membership guide. Is something that I have access to that I'll pass on to Yolanda today. American Herbal Products guidance documents for members. When we first registered with the FDA, we're like, oh, it looks like we're going to be doing a lot more manufacturing and encouraged to do contract manufacturing. And people were coming to us and asking that. We went to trade shows and we asked a couple experienced, 20, 30 year in the industry companies. The consistent thing, a couple of people said to us, we said, do you think we should join APA? And they said, well, you'd be stupid not to. You're going to save thousands of dollars on legal fees. So, for maybe $1,000 a year membership at the time, it seemed like a lot of money for us. And it's true. You instantly get access to, what's going to otherwise cost you tens of thousands of dollars in legal and consultant fees. Because if you've ever hired a consultant, you know that within a week, you're going to have spent $1,000 getting answers to things that may be in these guidance documents. So here's some details. This link, the APA guidance documents, details what and where these are. Most of these are behind the paywall that you have to be a member of the organization. So If you'd like to schedule a discovery session with 5 Flavors Herbs regarding private label contract manufacturing, please email us. We have more information about our services, including price ranges, turnaround times, and we're getting ready. We're planning for the next year where we're going to introduce a lot more topicals into our roster that we contract manufacture, and try to put out some private label, white label options in addition to things that, we do a lot more custom stuff now, and we see the inefficiencies of that and are looking to create some gap between that inefficiencies. So I'll leave this here, and or I can stop sharing. Should I stop sharing, Yolanda?
Wonderful. Yeah, thank you so much. If you stop sharing, I have a few questions that people have been asking throughout the presentation, and then we can cover those. So yeah, first of all, thank you so much. That was a really great overview of like the different options. And yeah, I certainly feel like I learned some things through that as well. We had a good question about like the privacy of our formulas when we are sending things away to for contract manufacturing. So like the question was, how can I be sure that my formulas and recipes are private and protected? Or can I? I've heard some rumors of people using contract manufacturers stealing and reselling clients' formulations. Is that an issue? And are there things people can do to protect against that? What's the deal there?
Signing a non-disclosure agreement is something that any company is going to do. We do that with any company. And, that legally protects both of you. We stipulate in our mutual non-disclosure agreement that most of what we see are algorithms that are pretty common. And, a lot of people come to us with variations on a Chinese medical formula with one herb added to it. And like, okay, so you wanted to sign a non-disclosure agreement about this? This is in most common textbooks as a common modifier for this. So doing some legal vetting of a non-disclosure agreement that further protects you is something that I'd consider. If you want to invest in an attorney to do that, there's a lot of templates for mutual non-disclosure agreements. I've looked at many of them, and I think there's a difference between. So this is an important consideration. What's the distinction between a formula that has standard forms and something that is patentable? Because a proprietary formula and ingredient structure is not patentable, and that is a legal definition. So. If you have a unique extraction process that you've developed and a method for analyzing the outcome of that is clearly defined, I would say that's where you have further protection. If that's an increased amount of a molecule that's being used for marketing, that's if you said I have a special method for extracting hypericin, when the sun is at its apex, and then I use ultrasound, and then, and then I test it with this method, that is more patentable and protectable than I have a formula that uses 3 pretty common herbs in the marketplace that may be less unique than I think.
Yeah, great. I think also like recording just in general, the more that we can, like the better as well, so that if we ever do have issues, we can have some sort of evidence of what we have done or those sort of things as well. It's an interesting topic though, because of its there's lots of different pieces that come into that. We also had another question about like actually finding the quality manufacturers. So like, do people go to Google? Is there a professional association or a list of potential manufacturers? Like, where do we actually find the ones to work with?
One, you can go to the American Herbal Products website, and they have a open catalog of their members who they're representing, and look who does what types of contract manufacturing is one venue. You can, there are probably for topical products that will exist there too. You can go to trade shows, and like next week, we're going to Supply Side West in Las Vegas, which is the biggest ingredient and contract manufacturing trade show in the United States. And we've exhibited at that. And this year we're not exhibiting, but we meet with our clients, and then we meet with other contract manufacturers who, one, we sell ingredients to, and two, we refer people to. So that's a venue that you can go and see who's exhibiting at Supply Side West. There are probably trade associations for natural skincare. I think it's the Soap Makers Guild is a organization that I think is out there that I know people participate in. Some natural cosmetic companies that we know work with the Soap Makers Guild, and they probably have some great resources. And then with, I think as with anything, you can go and look on the internet, and how do you vet those companies goes back to that earlier slide. Like, do they have a third-party GMP certification? What is the experience of their herbalists on staff? How long have they been around? Do they have any references? And that becomes stickier because they may or may not want to share their customers, and their customers may or may not want to know who they're working with. Because we have some testimonials on our website from customers of ours that we agreed, okay, this is cool. This is cool if people know that you work with us, and I also don't want other contract manufacturers calling those customers saying, oh, I see you work with 5 flavors. So, people might be a little more vaulted about that, a little more hermetic about that information.
Yeah, and often it does just come down to doing your own research and actually reaching out to people and asking and finding things as well. Like, it's a process. It's more intricate, I think, because you can have all of the different pieces that come together when you're doing contract manufacturing, but you have more control over the whole process as well. That's kind of the big draw card there. Yeah. The next question that we had is not directly related to contract manufacturing, but the question is, are Chinese herbs illegal or mostly accepted and as ingredients? So like the actual Chinese herbs, what are their like?
Great.
Yeah.
So great question. Are Chinese herbs legally and accepted as ingredients? There's a complex answer and a simple answer. There's what is called the GRAS, or generally recognized as safe list. And I forget what year, it might be 19, herbs that were already in commerce before 1996 that didn't have a record of serious adverse events have all kind of been grandfathered in. And so there's been a Chinese herb trade for a very long time. There's Chinese herbal pharmacies in the Sierra foothills from the gold rush. So there's been Chinese herbs in commerce in California since the 1860s, which I think is wonderfully cool. But there's been an established kind of pharmaceutical grade herb trade of, and the practice of Chinese medicine was codified in the 70s in California. And so there's been a big herb trade of extracts, raw herbal material, et cetera. And so those are totally legal and generally recognized as safe. Some things have been pulled off the market. Ma Huang, for example, is no longer accessible. That's because it was exploited in the industry, not because it was exploited as a supplement for energy, and people died. A couple of baseball players died while using ephedra as an energy supplement during spring training in Arizona. And all of a sudden, practitioners can't use Ma Huang or ephedra, which is awful because its safe use is very powerful. Aconite is another herb that should not be on the free market, but used intentionally with skill in Chinese medicine, it's remarkably powerful. So there's some examples like that. And when people come to us and say, I'm manufacturing this thing with aconite, and they say, I'm going to take it out to retailers. I say, no, that's not okay. Like, we have our own discretion for what we're comfortable with and what liability we're willing to take based on some of our customers' choices. Chinese herbs are increasingly expensive. Chinese herbs, there's some great suppliers. Because it's not my company, I'm going to really just feel comfortable naming names. Spring Wind herbs and new herbs are remarkable. If you're looking for good quality Chinese herbs, new herbs will sell to, they sell a lot to the industry. New herbs will sell to non-licensed TCM practitioners. Spring Wind may ask you to demonstrate your license.
Awesome. That was a great answer. Yeah. In the chat, people are saying awesome question, even better answer. Thank you so much for that, Ben. So that's
and yeah, thanks. The one thing I'll add to that is they are fully transparent in what is certified organic. Both those companies have very high level organic practices. Two, they have they'll have a disclosure of, is this certified organic? Is this tested? And is this not tested? So before you click and put it in your cart, you'll have an answer to that, which is really helpful for us too.
Yeah, wonderful. We have another question about the purchase integrity of the product. So this is like if you order a product that is manufactured by someone else, but then you decant it. So does that count as like taking the product out of its like purchased integrity? So let me see. Does that make sense? So like if you alter the product, so if you decant it after you've bought it, who's kind of responsible if something goes wrong?
So that's a great question, because it helps with the distinction of buying an ingredient versus buying a finished product. So you're buying an ingredient for further processing. And it is, I mean, this is how I'd set it up and how I'd advocate. If you are, you want to set a specification or know what you're getting is what you expect to get from that customer. If somebody said, I'm going to do all these further processes for it, we say that's up to you to test the capabilities and compatibilities of this ingredient that we're declaring what it is. That's up to you to discover through your own research and development whether it's compatible with your processes. And thus, you're taking the liability on once you're seeking to transform it into something else.
Great. Yep, that makes sense, I think. We have one more question at this point. If anyone else has questions, put it in the chat now so that we have time to like see it and respond. But the last question I've got for the moment is Chris is actually asking about the herbal pharmacy offering to practitioners. So she is a practicing herbalist and is interested in that offering about the pharmacy. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, I mean, that is our I'd say 90% of our customers are Chinese medical practitioners, but we want everybody to use it. Our herbal pharmacy has gone from having granulated extracts of Chinese herbs, several hundred tinctures, and bulk Chinese and Western herbs to deciding what is practical. And now we do granulated extracts and probably have 250 Western and Chinese herbs that we make available to compound for people. Before you start a compounding herbal pharmacy, because I saw somebody was interested in doing that, really do your math and decide what is worth your time and other people's time and what the market will bear, because we've lost a lot of money stocking bulk herbs, and a lot of it's not affordable to stock every Chinese herb, and basically we've wound up wasting a lot. And so do the math of what people's time is worth if you are paying to staff this, and if you're the only one staffing, assess what is your time worth. Because if a formula takes an hour to compound or 2 hours to compound because somebody's nuanced sophistication and you set your pricing for that to be reasonable, are you charging them for that 2 hours of time? We've learned all this stuff the hard way. I'm happy to share resources about that if somebody wants to reach out to me. Our custom herbal pharmacy is open to anybody who wants to use it. And, we ask for people's, if you don't have a license, we'll ask for some details of your credentialing or where you're expressing things, but we generally stock things that are safe and appropriate for herbal compounding.
Great, thank you. We have a couple more questions that have come in now. So one question is, do customers provide you all with labels during the contract manufacturing process, or do you provide the labels for the customers? So just wondering what the manufacturer's involvement is with the labeling side of things.
Other manufacturers may have different practices. And we have a bunch of details. If you go to the FAQ that I shared, there's like a 6-page document that outlines a lot of things that you can also use as a guidepost for how you interact with other contract manufacturers. So look at that, please. And we have everybody get labels from a third-party labeling company. And we, we'll source bottles, and we will recommend labeling companies, but that's another layer of unintended potential stickiness, because different companies have different turnaround times, different textiles. So we have accumulated experience. Here's what we'll say. This is what we feel the most confident using with our equipment. And if you have issues with other things, we can't take responsibility for all of it. That is, if there's a little bit of bubbling with the fancy glass and the fancy paper you want to use, we can't take responsibility for that. We have people acknowledge that. In terms of the content of the labels, we will not apply things that we believe are in violation of law in the United States. So we'll do a label review process and then have people send the final reviewed label to, which we still won't take legal responsibility for the content, but we'll take it to the limit of our own confidence, and then have people send that to the label manufacturer and then send that to us. So does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. That answers.
Some companies may have in-house label printers. Probably if you're working with a private label company that has a real robust program for doing white label or private label where they have off-the-shelf options, they may have their own label printer and say, great, you send us your logo file and we're going to put it on this generic label.
Great. Yeah, we have a few more questions coming in. So the next question is, so we can resell your pharmacy items with trouble. That's what I had written down. That's what the comment was. So basically, I think they're asking, can we resell your pharmacy items? I think this is related to the other question.
Our pharmacy is set up in a way that we accept payment at point of sale, and that there is an opportunity for practitioners to mark that up a little bit to honor their formulation time. But essentially, we're selling our things from our pharmacy at a retail price. We do have a custom wholesale program that is kind of intermediate between our pharmacy and our retail products and our contract manufacturing, where we stock some bulk herbs, bulk tinctures, that if you want to buy a half gallon or a gallon of something that's customized that you want to break down and further dispense to people, that's an option. So there's an opportunity to get wholesale prices for smaller volumes. It's not manufactured for you. We'll manufacture ingredient for customers. And we also have this compounding feature where it's essentially a retail price that you can still mark up and honor your time. So I think it's a comprehensive answer for that.
Great, thank you. Okay, we've got a couple more to go, and we're keeping you around for a while.
I'm okay. I can hang out.
You're good. Okay. You got it. Awesome. I think everyone is really appreciating having this opportunity to be able to ask questions. So, Layla is asking, how has Prop 65 labeling affected the willingness of your clients to use products made in California?
Yeah. Prop 65 is important for people to understand if you're going to sell products in California. So Prop 65 is really about products that may cause reproductive harm and or cancer. And it is a very low, so if you are driving in California, you'll see there's Prop 65 warnings at the gas station. If you are, that things may cause cancer and or birth defects. If you're in a coffee shop, you'll see Prop 65 warnings that acrylamide may cause cancer. That is a byproduct of making coffee. So Prop 65 in California in dietary supplements, there's no legal allowed threshold for pesticides in dietary supplements. There is in conventional produce, but there's not an allowed threshold for pesticides. So that's not the issue. Heavy metals, lead, arsenic, selenium, and there's mercury, are all things that are tested for in dietary supplements. If you are making, so we mainly manufacture liquid extracts, and we test everything. So we don't have to apply Prop 65 labels because, one, heavy metals tend to not go into solution in hydroethanolic products, in tinctures, which is great. So we don't have to put this Prop 65 label that says, this product may cause cancer and or birth defects, which, because we do a lot of work with fertility companies, and we operate our own Chinese medical fertility line. That's a place where people definitely don't want to see that. The communication around it, where that is important, is to really understand thresholds for different heavy metals. Because actually Prop 65 is extraordinarily stringent, and it's much more stringent than European Union levels. And it's much more stringent for allowable levels of heavy metal and lead in chocolate or kale, because there's a lot of things that uptake heavy metals from the soil where it exists and, bioaccumulate heavy metals. So developing literacy as a practitioner and or having a statement on a website. We don't have this on our website because we're not vending things that are above the Prop 65 threshold. So.
Great. Next question, we've got 2 more to go, is at what time should you update and retest a particular ingredient, even if you have had a COA previously?
Yeah. This depends. So that's a great question. When do you want to retest a ingredient or a finished product, even if you have a COA? I would say that depends on what your marketplaces are. That depends on which of the hundreds of herbs you could be using. This depends on the delivery system that it's in. And it depends on your specifications for application. And I'll give some examples. If you are sourcing ingredients in an oil will go rancid much more quickly than anything in ethanol will spoil. And so understanding what is the solvent that's been used and its capacity to degrade, we'll expunge things more quickly just based on organoleptics. That is using our senses. That is smelling the bottle and saying, ooh, gross, this oil's gone rancid. We don't feel comfortable selling it. Let's dump it. Then we will tinctures that we know, are not oxidizing as quickly as those oils. So are you going, and so what are the specifications on the COA is the other thing. If it's for heavy metals aren't going to change in solution. if the specification for microbes, microbial testing is something that we have been doing for a dozen years now, and maybe had 3 times that we saw things start out very high and above allowable limits for aerobic plate count. And then we've never seen salmonella or some of the worst things that you're testing for. But we still do stability testing, and we've seen 5-10 years later, things are not having increased microbial proliferation, because 50% or more ethanol is a kill step. If you're using lower concentrations of ethanol, I'd be testing that more. So integrating a practice for stability testing that integrates labs and organoleptics, use of your senses, is really powerful. And then if you're looking at specific constituents, this is another layer. Or if you're looking at functionality from a internal organoleptic, that is, if I'm using California poppy or skullcap or valerian, I know how these feel in my consciousness. I know how they're going to affect my nervous system, make me relaxed or make me drowsy. In 5 or 10 years, if I'm going to be vending that in my clinic, and it still tastes like good medicine, if it's my clinic, I'm going to keep it in there if it makes me feel a certain way. If we're vending it to the public, we have our own internal dates for removing stuff from our inventory, at which point we may do a further test and we may donate them, but still think, hey, this is good medicine. If something is more subtle than some of those examples I just gave, or is known to deplete, then how do you test that organoleptically and or in the lab if you don't have specifications set for specific constituents? That's so that kind of, I'm putting that back to you as a rhetorical question. If you don't have constituent profile, if you don't have flavor analysis, if it's something that's going to modify the body in a specific way, that's why we've set our own internal considerations for, hey, look, we're just going to pull this from our inventory. I often tell people this, so you're like, what's the expiration date? And my truth with most things is tincture, because that's what I've used for almost 30 years clinically and in practices. The internal contents of the tincture are going to far outlast the label that you have on it. And both in elements of style, because it's going to look tacky in 5 years, no matter what. And no matter how hip and stylish you think it looks now, it's going to look tacky in 5 or 10 years. And it's probably going to fade and degrade, and the gum is going to degrade on the back sooner than the ingredients inside. What else?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. We have one final question, which is, do you have any resources for stability testing?
Labs, so again, it goes back to setting up your own specifications, and stability testing for topical products is a lot more nuanced and can be very, very nuanced, because there's a lot of room for fragility and a lot of room for things to go wrong in terms of the form being part of the function. That is, if you're combining different oils and using emulsifications with water oil or emulsifications, there's a lot of risk. So you really want to understand that. There's a lot of big companies out there. Their names are escaping me. I can send a few resources that can get very expensive. And because we don't do that much of that, I don't have a top of my head answer. For stability testing for other products, we're sending things off to standard labs that we use, and I could get a couple resources. The main lab that we use for identity is different than the labs that we use for microbes. So yeah, let me get some resources and share those with you.
Wonderful. If you send those to me after the call as well, we can make sure we get them on the replay page along with the slides and all of that sort of thing for, and also the links to. Would you like to as well recap the options, or if people want to find out more or contact you after this wraps up, where are the best places for people to do that?
I'll just share the screen again.
Sure.
Because that's the place to do that. And that's not the one I wanted to share. And that's not sharing. I'm just going to type it in here. You can send something to info@5flavorsherbs.com. And if you would like to, people are going to get the slides. So I think if you want to, on that last slide, there's a couple links to really specific frequently asked questions pages, and specifically a document, a 6-page document that outlines some of our practices. It's not updated with our third-party GMP certification, but it'll get people either. We're also looking to filter who's a good fit for us, and we entertain a lot of communication where we help accelerate the rate at which we get to this isn't a good fit. So
yeah, absolutely. And I will make sure that we have those links on the replay page anyway, so that people can go directly there as well. So thank you so much to everyone for actually showing up today, asking questions. It's always so lovely to have people on the live calls, just interacting with people so that people can, get direct answers to their questions. So thank you so much for turning up today. And thank you, Ben, for being here with us and sharing your knowledge. You can see that you just know so much, and just being freely sharing that with the rest of the herbal community is so wonderful to see. So thank you for everything that you have shared today.
Thanks for having me, Yolanda. I really appreciate it. I'm honored and really appreciate the container that you're holding for so many. So it's great for me to see who's here too, and see the work people are doing in their communities. And the more that organizations such as yours and us showing up as advocacy, it really enables herbalists to hold their place locally in their healthcare landscapes in the way that they do. So really celebrate the work that everybody is doing out there, in addition to what you're creating with Herbal Entrepreneur.
Yeah, thank you so much. It truly is special just to be able to connect people from all over the world and like one experience and the other. And I really do believe that the more that we can build these connections and help each other, all of us can continue on our journey in a more informed way. And that's really what this is all about. So thank you once again.
Yeah, you're welcome. All right.
All right. Thank you again.